used to be a pond about half a mile from my old house where I often went fishing. It was known as Daryl's Pond, though I never knew who Daryl was or why it was called that. It was an open spot, so occasionally others would fish there too, but most of the time it was just me. I had a small kayak that I tied to a pole I'd set up on the shore. It was around 3 o'clock in the afternoon when I paddled out to the middle of the pond, which was the best spot for catching fish. As I was fishing, I noticed someone coming out of the trees. I waved and smiled at him, and he hopped into a small boat near the edge of the pond, then started rowing towards me. As he got closer, I greeted him, saying, "Beautiful day, isn't it?" He replied, "Yes, absolutely," but then fell silent. The awkwardness started to build, and I felt like I had to keep the conversation going. "So, are you here to do some fishing?" I asked. "No, I don't actually fish," he said. "Well, it's never a bad day to relax on the pond," I added, trying to keep things light, but he kept rowing closer until his boat bumped into mine with a loud thud. I felt really uncomfortable. I wasn't scared yet, just weirded out. I was only 24 years old, and this guy looked like he was in his late 40s or 50s. The silence was unbearable. I pretended to focus on fishing, but I couldn't stop thinking about how strange this guy was. I could feel him staring at me, even as I turned halfway away from him. When I glanced to my right, he was indeed staring. I decided to be brave and made eye contact with him. After a few seconds, he looked away. "So, where are you from?" I asked him. He pointed behind himself towards the wooded hill leading past the dirt road and said, "Up there." "Oh, you live by Suffolk?" I asked. No, I don't," he replied. The conversation was awkward and his responses were short and unhelpful. He just sat there with a half smile, either looking at me or in my general direction. I was getting more and more creeped out and my heart was racing. I started rowing slowly towards the shore, trying to act like I was just looking for a better fishing spot, but I was terrified when I realized he was following me. "It's a great day, huh?" I said, my voice shaking. I got close enough to the shore and finally told the man, "I think I'm going to call it a day." When I turned to see his reaction, he was still staring at me, but the smile was gone. "I can't let you leave," he said, lifting his flannel shirt to reveal a handgun tucked into his jeans. The moment I processed what I was seeing, I dove out of the boat and ran for the shore. I sprinted the half-mile uphill through the woods back to my house, locking every door and window as soon as I got inside. I pulled down the blinds, but left a small crack so I could peek outside, just to make sure I wasn't being followed. As it got dark, I kept the lights off and continued watching the front yard. Eventually, I convinced myself that I hadn't been followed. Looking back, I know I should have called the police right away, and not doing so was a huge mistake. I left my bedroom windows open to let the room air out, figuring it was safe since my room was on the second floor. About half an hour after I turned off the light and got under the covers, I heard the sound of leaves crunching outside. I sat up to listen more closely. It was definitely something or someone walking around out there. Normally, I would have assumed it was a deer or a bear, but after what had just happened, I was still on edge. I sat up, barely moving, except for the trembling from fear, waiting as the footsteps stopped. "Hey, buddy, you up there? Trying to sleep? Sorry, I didn't mean to wake you," said a voice from outside. It was the same voice. I knew it instantly. I didn't make a sound. I crept out of my room, quietly went downstairs to the kitchen and grabbed the phone, practically crawling to avoid being seen through the open blinds. I finally called 911, whispering into the phone as I still hoped he hadn't spotted me. 20 minutes felt like an hour as I hid behind my bed, fearing I'd hear glass breaking downstairs or a knock on the back door, or worse, the voice again from outside my window. The police arrived and thoroughly checked the property and nearby woods, but found nothing. They suggested I stay with a friend or family member for a few days, so I did. I never saw or heard from the man again, but I moved a month later. I couldn't handle the constant fear and paranoia of being watched through my windows. Now, I feel much safer fishing by the bay. There was a time when I joined my brother-in-law, Ben, on a fishing trip with a few of his friends and my sister. Ben had always lived a comfortable life, and since my sister married him, she's been living the same way. I packed a small backpack with everything I'd need to spend the night on his boat and drove out to the nicer part of town by his house, which was right by the bay. His backyard literally led to the water, with a small wooden dock connected to his luxurious boat, named after my sister, Emily. Inspired by Forrest Gump, he had her name painted on the boat. We set sail early in the morning. Ben had packed tons of food and snacks, including plenty of hamburger meat, since, unsurprisingly, they had a barbecue installed on the boat. They always had to have the best of everything, and honestly, it was a bit annoying. A few hours into the trip, it wasn't as fun as I had imagined. Only one largemouth bass had been caught, and of course, Ben was the one who caught it. The others were getting really drunk, and I tried to get my sister to let me have a drink, but she kept saying no because I was only 17 at the time. She's always been a bit of a buzzkill, and at that moment, I wondered why I even agreed to come along. The only part of the trip I enjoyed was relaxing and tanning on the back deck of Ben's unnecessarily large boat. As the sun began to set, painting the sky a beautiful orange, Ben started grilling the burgers. It seemed odd to me since we had caught 3 fish by that time, which would have been a more fitting dinner, but I preferred burgers anyway, so I didn't complain. By the time we finished eating, it was dark. There was something both calming and unsettling about being in the middle of the ocean at night, like being in space. Nothing around you as far as the eye can see, and without your boat, you'd be as good as gone. Everyone was insanely drunk by now, blasting music, screaming, and laughing. They eventually invited me to play cards with them inside, so I joined in. I didn't have anything else to do anyway. There was an extra beer on the counter, so I grabbed it. At that point, I didn't care anymore, and my sister was too out of it to stop me. After 3 beers, I finally loosened up and started to enjoy myself. I had to lower the music earlier because it was too loud to even hear myself talk. Ben and his friends were completely wasted by now, and my sister was drunker than I'd ever seen her, though not as bad as them. But it was all fine. They were just adults trying to have a good time, safe and secluded on a boat in calm waters, far from any land. But then, things took a horribly unexpected turn. Over the now quieter music, one of Ben's friends and I heard a noise coming from outside. I turned off the music completely, and we all heard it. a faint call for help from outside. We rushed to the side of the boat, where we saw a small boat with two men looking up at us. I asked them what was wrong, and one of them said they were out of food and gas and needed help. I didn't feel good about the situation, but everyone else was too drunk to make any important decisions. It felt like it was up to me. Ben told them to wait while he went to get the ladder, but he tripped and dropped his beer on the way. I figured I'd hate myself if I didn't help, so I helped Ben carry the ladder to the edge and hook it to the railing. The two men climbed aboard and thanked us. Ben, my sister, and their friends were too drunk to speak clearly, so I apologized to the men, explaining that everyone had a bit too much to drink. They didn't seem to acknowledge my comment, and instead asked Ben if we had any extra food. We led them to the kitchen, where Ben handed them the leftover burgers, which they quickly ate. I still felt uneasy about the situation, but after we gave them a can of gasoline, they thanked us and climbed back down the ladder. We all went to sleep after that. Ben and my sister took the bedroom, while I slept on the couch. I tried to get some sleep, but eventually got up to get a drink and use the bathroom. Ben had told us to pee into the ocean to save water on the boat. When I stepped outside, I expected to hear the calm splashing of water, but instead, I heard the faint sound of a boat engine. The darkness surrounding the boat made it impossible to see where the sound was coming from, so I turned on the searchlight. I scanned the waters and eventually spotted the same boat from earlier, now coming closer. At that exact moment, I heard a blood-curdling scream from below deck. I rushed back inside to find one of Ben's friends standing in the corner, the other sitting up in shock. Ben and my sister burst out of their room to see what was happening. One of Ben's friends managed to say that he saw two figures standing over him before they ran out the front door to the deck. We ran outside, but there was no sign of them. I pointed out where I had seen the boat, but by then it was already gone. We searched the boat, and all we found missing were a few cans of gasoline, Ben's wallet, and his keys, which he had left on the kitchen table. We sped back to Ben's house that night, taking 4 hours to get there. Thankfully, no one had broken in, and Ben used the spare key hidden in the backyard to get inside. The locks were changed the next day. The scariest part is that just a few weeks ago, their security cameras caught two men trying to unlock their front door before quickly running off. We're 99% sure it was them. I was 21 years old when I went fishing with my 84-year-old grandfather for the first time. We took an hour-long drive from our suburban home to a more remote part of the state. My grandfather always fished at this one particular lake that hardly anyone knew about, where he somehow always left with coolers full of fish. He was a serious fisherman, that much was clear. I didn't even know there were specific terms for different parts of fishing, but he was throwing around terms I'd never heard of, even during the car ride, which finally ended when we turned off the main quiet road and onto about 2 miles of dirt trails. He parked his Jeep at the side of the trail, and from there, we carried the small boat through some thick forest. Even at 84 years old, my grandpa was strong. In fact, I was getting tired from carrying the boat, but I didn't want to show it by asking to stop for a break. It would have been embarrassing if he could carry it longer than I could. I'll skip ahead to when we were actually sitting in the boat, fishing. He had just finished showing me how to get the line and hook in the water. After that, he didn't say much, focusing intently on what he was doing. I turned around to ask him a question, but he seemed to be leaning in, staring at something in the water. He didn't respond, so I went back to concentrating on fishing. About 20 seconds later, I turned around out of curiosity, and he was leaning even closer. I started to worry that something might be wrong. I put my hand on his shoulder, and that's when I heard splashing sounds. My grandpa seemed to push something back into the water and then yelled at the top of his lungs for me to paddle as fast as I could back the way we came. My heart was racing. I didn't know what had happened, but I knew it wasn't good. As soon as the boat hit the dirt, my grandpa was moving as fast as he could, getting out of the boat and heading back to the car. We left the boat and all our gear behind. When we got to the car, he floored it down the trails, and I kept screaming at him to tell me what had happened. It took him about 10 minutes to gather his thoughts before he finally said, "I was looking down into the water, and I knew I saw something. It kept getting closer to the surface, clearer as it got closer, and I swear it looked like a face. Then it got even closer, and as I was leaning in to get a better look, something reached out and grabbed me." That was all he would say for a while, but a few weeks later, he tried to describe what he saw. From his description, it sounded almost like he was describing a human face. Almost. But the thing I remember most was him saying, "All I know is it wasn't."